Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Guys Who Stared. Stats, Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs as we get ready to break down the Midwest region. It's hard to believe that we've already gone through the other three, Tyler. If you look at the bracket, you have the West obviously across from this one. If you want to see how that one's filled out, you can obviously watch our West region as well as our other three we've already gone through. My picks shown on screen, Tyler's will be not shown, but let's just jump right into it. The 116 Purdue taking on Grambling. We do have that confirmed now. We are recording this Wednesday night. If you're watching it on Thursday or Friday or some other day or 3 years from now or whatever, we do have Purdue versus Grambling. Don't have an actual spread on this one with it being, just announced that Grambling had won the game because
spread's a lot.
They did in overtime. Spread's going to be a lot, yeah. But either way, Purdue, the 1 seed, had trouble with the 16 seed last year with a loss to Fairleigh Dickinson. I think the question on America's mind is, will it happen again? I don't think so. I don't think lightning strikes twice in the same spot.
I don't think so. However, I will say this for Grambling, who, by the way, in my notes, I did have them advancing on in their first 4 game. Their saving grace is that they're not going to be scared of the moment. Why? They faced Colorado, Iowa State, Dayton, Washington State, Florida, all in their non-conference. Actually had one of the toughest non-conferences in the country. Lo and behold, after starting out slow, they are now 13-2 over the past 15 games. Well, that's conference, obviously. That being said, though, it's not like they necessarily performed against all those teams I mentioned. They're going to be used to seeing elite talent. Can they stop Zach Edey? No. It's not happening. It's not happening. Purdue will indeed beat the 16 seed.
Well, there you go. If they somehow lost to this one, man, I don't want to spend half the video talking about what ifs, but, that's kind of what we're doing here anyways.
Would that not just be the most crushing blow?
That would be, what do you do at that point if you're Purdue? Like, if you're a Purdue fan, I would just feel
you can't fire Matt Painter.
You can't. No, you were a 1 seed again. Like, you're very clearly talented. It's just you keep running into the same problem of every year you lose to a low seed. And, someone already pointed it out that, they've lost to a 14, they've lost to a 15, they've lost to a 16, they've lost to a 12. The only thing that's missing is losing to a 13 seed, which that would be Samford if they drew them. We're going to talk about their matchup with Kansas here in a little bit because of the news that came out yesterday. But Purdue, barring something that would be crazier than what we saw last year, what would probably be the craziest upset in NCAA tournament history, which is crazy to think considering this would be the third time a 16 would be to 1.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Words would not describe it for once.
And then you would have to actually have a serious conversation about Matt Painter. Because
you would.
At that point, you look at the resume and say he is the opposite of whatever Tom Izzo captures in March, right?
Right.
Because it just falls apart somehow. So as much as you can't, as much as you say, well, you can't fire Matt Painter, that'd be a rock and hard place. You got a coach that has had supreme regular season success, developed some great talent, but for whatever reason, just an albatross hangs over him when it comes to March. So that would be a very, very interesting what if.
Thankfully, shouldn't have to have that conversation. Purdue will get the win. Shouldn't. But moving on to the 8-9, Utah State and TCU. This is one of those frogs favored by 4.5. One of those weird kind of Mountain West Big 12 matchups that Mountain West, we talked about it a little bit if you watch some of the other bracket breakdowns going into this one, disrespected. 6 teams in. Committee was only going to put 5 in. They didn't want to put New Mexico in, and what a surprise, they're favored over Clemson. Utah State, another one of those teams that seems like every single year, no matter what situation they get thrown in, they thrive. But they're playing a TCU team that does the exact same thing.
Give me Utah State. TCU started 11-2, 2-1 in conference. But down the stretch, Cade, after beating Houston, they finished 7-8 in their final 15 regular season games.
I think
that, to me, does not scream a team that is ready for March. Screams inconsistent. Yes, Big 12 is a baller of a conference. We've addressed that. Obviously, we watch a lot of Big 12 play. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I'm slanting against the Big 12 teams simply because I see them beat each other up, right, with the exception of like a Houston. But I just think Utah State, as well as the rest of the Mountain West teams, really want to set out to prove this year that hey, we do deserve that respect. Talk about the Big East, being kind of an underrated conference, I think, this year. The Mountain West seemingly for the last 10 years has been underrated to a degree.
And that's the problem. You mentioned
depth of it, I should say.
You mentioned the Big 12 kind of beating itself up from your perspective because obviously, we're in Big 12 country. We focus on the Big 12 more. I think that's the same thing for the Mountain West, though, is they have 7 with UNLV. You can add them. Yeah. They were beating Princeton, the NIT, last time I checked. Very good conference.
Absolutely.
Very underrated. However, with the exception of San Diego State, who's kind of seemingly lived in their own bubble, the Mountain West the past few years, they talk this big game, and it's rightfully deserved for the most part, but then they get to March, and they can't get it done.
They can't back it up.
Big 12, though, kind of some years, same situation. Iowa State, you've talked about some years, no one expects anything. They make a Sweet 16. Last year, they were a 6th seed. They score 40 points in a game against Pitt. The Big 12 has that image problem sometimes as well. They've built themselves up, this year the best conference in basketball. TCU, middle-of-the-road Big 12 team. You can already see on the screen how I feel about other teams Tyler thinks are middle-of-the-road in the Big 12. I like TCU to get the job done over Utah State. Close game. I think it'll be back and forth the entire way.
Yeah, for sure.
I think TCU holds on for dear life and gets the job done. And that brings us to upset mania for a lot of people. The popular 5-12, Gonzaga taking on McNeese. Gonzaga is a 6.5-point favorite, but Will Wade, what he has done down there in Louisiana with McNeese, it can't be short of one of the greater turnarounds you could think. If he said we're going to come in, we only won, what was it? It was 7, 8 games?
11.
11 games,
11
exactly.
games last year.
Well, 11 games, turn them around. They're a 30-win team this year. Conference champions, done everything you need to. He's going to be one of those guys that everyone's going to be looking at, okay, he's a winner. But can he win against a Gonzaga team that some people feel don't deserve a 5? BYU technically would have gotten it, but they don't play on Sundays, so Gonzaga will happily take their I'm not even joking about it. That's really what's happened.
Yeah.
But Gonzaga, weird start to the year. Felt, down, lost at Santa Clara on the night they were retiring Steve Nash's number. Everyone thought, where in the world are the Zags that we're used to seeing? And they got to that second gear, got to the West Coast Conference Championship game, lost to St. Mary's. Can they hold on, though, in that 5-12 game that a lot of people kind of have circled as the big one?
Surprisingly, I think this was maybe my toughest first-round decision because early looking at the numbers, I said, you know what? Like you had mentioned, Gonzaga kind of turned it on down the stretch. You like that momentum. Yes, they fell short in the conference tournament, but I think they proved enough to show, okay, we're on the right track, going into March. You get that dreaded 12 versus 5. You look at McNeese, you look at the schedule, you go, well, that's not really impressive. They didn't do anything. But what eventually turned me around to take McNeese in this is one man. Shahada Wells, the senior, out of Texas, 17 points per game, 4 boards, 4 assists, and 3 steals. He shoots 30% from deep. He's a guard. Is it kind of similar to an Oral Roberts for me where you remember with A. Smith, who's now in Texas, you thought, oh, this Oral Roberts team, okay, good story, but they don't have anybody. And then A. Smith just kind of makes that big tournament run, if you will, takes over the game. If there's anybody that can do it, we've seen guards do it. We've seen Kemba do it. We've seen Shabazz Napier do it, to bring up some names. And Derrick Rose, Steph Curry. I'm not saying that Wells is in that ilk, but the gut took over, and I said, give me McNeese. I'll buy into the McNeese hype, similar to what James Madison. Gonzaga's a good team, but I think maybe some of those issues they had earlier in the season appear during this game, and then they can't handle the moment of going, oh, no, hey, we're reverting back to some old ways. They can't climb out of it.
This is one of those that this happened last year. I believe when we were doing this preview I want to say it was Charleston was a 12 seed in the game, and the whole hype was around Charleston. They had a 30-win season. I can't remember who they were playing as the 5 off the top of my head. But I remember I sat here and said, every once in a while you come across a 12-5 that on paper looks great, on analytics doesn't look the best. No 5-12 ever does.
Sure.
Unless it's something absolutely catastrophic where it's a great 12 and a super weak 5. but if it looks too good to be true, it usually is. Gonzaga is a different team in February and March than they were in January, December, and November. I like the Zags.
And I don't blame you. I think, heart of hearts, I want to take Gonzaga, but just something is telling me, man, I think Benice to pull this off. Maybe I just buy into the hype easy. I don't know. We'll find out. It would not surprise me if Gonzaga proves everybody wrong, says, no, we're not that 5 seed that blows it to, one of these kind of lower mid-majors.
And the other thing I believe in Gonzaga and what they've been able to build out there, I mean, just everyone who's come through that program, you look at almost the last decade, consistency. Every year, Sweet
Absolutely.
16 at minimum.
Yeah.
Every single year, you can almost, of course, now that I said it, watch it not happen, you can book them in the Sweet 16. That's another one of those. We talked about in some of the other videos. If you've seen those, you know what I'm about to say. If it keeps on happening and you notice that trend, keep riding with the trend until it stops.
Yeah, I mean, it's
you
the
keep
whole,
going with the gravy train until it ends.
Absolutely, until it's proven it can't be done, right? I mean,
Exactly.
It was the same way with Tom Brady. Once he kind of achieved that next level, we all said, all right, you can't bet against Tom Brady until he for sure loses or retires. And, Patrick Mahomes is obviously getting that way himself, where it's just like, I don't care if me and you are playing receiver and we're terrible. He'll find a way. Don't bet against him.
Exactly. And the next game we have Kansas and Samford. The legend of Buckyball at Samford, what they've been able to do, a fun offense to watch playing Kansas. And this was a game where I felt that Kansas would be able to overcome it. And Kevin McCullough is announced out for the rest of the tournament. Hunter Dickinson not at full strength.
Mm-hmm.
This has all the makings of the 13 over the 4. Kansas is still favored by 7.5 last time I checked earlier today. I don't know if that line's dipped any further or not.
I think it's held pretty true. That being said, it's the seat's running hot for Kansas. I mean, who would have thought at the beginning of the season, if you told us at the beginning of the season, hey, by the way, Kansas is not going into the tournament as a 1 seed, and they're going into the tournament as a 4 seed, and they're probably actually got a good shot to lose that first round game, we would have been like, no, not possible. Too much star power. But it just goes to show how depth and just the grace of being able to stay healthy is such a huge thing, because this team wasn't deep to begin with, right? They kind of proved that early on. That was a red flag that popped up. And then the injuries come in, you're even thinner, and it's just like, oh, no. This doesn't happen to Kansas. This never does. But it's happened, and you go from favorite to win it all to just now all of a sudden they probably don't get out of the first round, because, a lot of these teams like Samford usually play slower pace, take care of the ball. That's their recipe for beating the Goliaths, if you will, right? Oh, no, not the Samford team. You mentioned Buckyball. They get out, they run, they push the pace, they launch threes. So not only could Kansas fall here, Samford might come in and just, if they get on a roll, this could get ugly. It could get ugly.
And it reminds me of the game Kansas just played. They played Cincinnati. They let Jizzle James get hot, which, by the way, all-time name, Jizzle James.
Son of Edrin James.
Yeah, exactly. Got to get the reference in there for Cincinnati. But I think here's where I'm at, though, and I'm at a difficult spot with this one, because with Kevin McCullough, that news, if you would have told me no Hunter Dickinson as well, it's over. Samford 100% all the way, full confidence. But with him being back, it's the one weakness Samford has. They're not the biggest team in the world by any means. Hunter Dickinson standing at 7'1", you have that size advantage there. And even with him being hobbled and not 100%, I think Kansas, if they can establish that presence in the paint, they can start to try to will themselves into this game. KJ Adams is going to be hunting in that area as well. I think Kansas gets the scare of all scares. We say Kansas does not cover, but they hold on for dear life in another game that's too good to be true, and Kansas squeaks away with a win.
So just for the scorekeeping, Cade has the 5-4. I have the 12-13.
Correct. Yes. We could not be any more different. We talked about this would be the crazy one, and it's going to get crazier because our next game, South Carolina and Oregon, which is another very popular 6-11. We talked about it a little bit before we started this video. This is the chaos bracket for just about everybody.
Oh, the Midwest is mid. It's mid. I mean, once you get past Purdue, it's mid.
And then you look at South Carolina and Oregon. And I think we're going to disagree on this one again, but the opposite way, because we talked about momentum. If you watched our South Region video, you talked about NC State and the talented big man they have in DJ Burns. Oregon's got a pretty fun one as well. His name is Nafali Dante. And you don't want to be caught in Dante's Inferno, and that's exactly what happened out at Vegas. You go out there, he starts going off, kept just having consistency after consistency. South Carolina, an amazing story, a great turnaround for the Gamecocks. They've been hot most of the year. When heat meets heat, someone's going to burn out. And I think, unfortunately for South Carolina, Oregon is one of those situations where when you get Dana Altman in a game, same way I talked about Tom Izzo, that man knows how to win in March no matter the situation. I think this is the upset of the Midwest. The 11 beating the 6, talked about 11 over 6 is the new 5 over 12. Give me the Ducks to march on to the second round, or waddle on to the second round.
We disagree for the third game in a row because I think South Carolina is not just a flash of the pan. You're talking about a team that efficiency-wise is top 35 in offense and defense. They're a very well-rounded squad. I think what they did in the SEC can be overlooked. I know it's not necessarily the Big 12 or, some maybe the Big East. Yeah, it's still a good conference, and I think they're legit. Those wins over Kentucky and Tennessee, I think, really proved that, okay, this team has the makeup of what it takes to succeed come March. Oregon's a nice story. I understand the momentum side. We talked about that already, where generally if you're talking your, 5 seeds and, onward, them running through that conference tournament has a lot more weight than maybe a 1 or a 2 seed or a 3 seed. But I think South Carolina's legit. I think they've got the right balance, the right mix. If Oregon was facing a different 6 seed, I'd be on the boat with you, but I can't. Give me the Gamecocks.
There you go. South Carolina, by the way, 1.5-point favorite in this one. You talked about the money line shifting a little bit as we were recording these.
Yeah,
slowly but surely.
It went closer to even me in South Carolina. By the time they tipped this one off, it may be more of a pick-em rather than a slight favorite for South Carolina.
But we will have to wait and see. We might finally agree on this one, unless one of us is truly off the deep end. We'll have to see. Creighton is a 12.5-point favorite over the Zips of Akron, which Akron, if you watch that MAC tournament, I mean, you want to talk about absolute elation on one end and heartbreak and on the other. Akron, some people think, they're a mistake by Kent State away from not being here. But either way, the Zips are here, and they're a fun team to watch. I mean, they can be gritty. They can be high-flying. They're kind of one of those jack-of-all-trades, master of none, however. You go up against Creighton, and I'm going to bring the phrase back, consistently inconsistent is a way to describe Creighton. When they're hot, they can beat just about anybody. When they're off, they're still not bottom of the Big East tier. I don't think many teams can be as bottom of the barrel as DePaul or Georgetown. But Creighton could still be kind of in that weird spot where you don't trust them.
I can understand that, especially when you get bounced in the first round of your conference tournament to a Providence team that did not make it and then, lost in the NIT, correct?
Yes. Now, granted, that was a depleted Providence roster.
Absolutely.
They didn't have everybody.
Absolutely. But to be fair, I'm going to buy that Creighton is the 7-1 team that we saw down the stretch that whooped up on UConn and not the team that got bounced in the first round of the conference tournament. That trio, Shireman, Kalkbrenner, Alexander, an Oklahoma kid, by the way. Man, those 3 guys would be lead men on any other squad just about, with the exception of a handful. And to have them all 3 on the same team. We talked about last year with UConn having the 1-2 punch. Creighton's got the 1-2-3 punch. I mean, that's pretty deep in the bag. And those 3 guys, I think, as we'll get into it here, are going to really flex the muscle. That star power will take over. Give me the Jays to roll easy.
And that's where I'm at. I'm not going to go that crazy. We finally agree on something again, by the way. First time since the 116 we agree. But Creighton and Oregon on my side, Creighton, South Carolina on yours. That brings us, though, to the 7-10, Texas and Colorado State. Texas, a 2.5-point favorite over the Rams in the battle of the Bighorns here, the Longhorns and the Rams.
I think Colorado State was a little ticked.
A little bit.
I think they proved that in that game against Virginia. Set out to say, hey, we shouldn't be one of the first 4 games, right? Same with Colorado, Boise State, who are having a heck of a game as we're doing these right now. But I think Colorado State in the non-conference showed some of those flashes where, hey, we could go compete with some of the best of them. Isaiah Stevens is going to be a guy that you want to watch. Dynamic player. 46% from deep. He's one of the top in the country. And if he gets rolling, I don't know if Texas got the firepower. We talked about Max Asmith, what he could do. And his run at Oral Roberts, right? But now he finds himself on the other side of the coin. His weakness is he's a defensive liability. That's not a secret. I think Colorado State attacks that. Give me Colorado State continuing their angry run, at least for another round.
Colorado State, as you mentioned, proved a point. Anytime you can shut down an already not very good Virginia offense, anytime you can make someone not score for nearly 13 straight minutes and nearly an hour of real time.
That's tough to do.
That is, some of that's, yes, we can laugh at Virginia's offense now, but some of that's Colorado State's defense.
Absolutely.
They are a gritty team, and I think you can bring that fight to Texas and punch them in the mouth a little bit. Texas will get up off the mat, but I think Colorado State is just a little bit tougher, For all the, I've talked about Big 12 teams doing this and that. Texas and TCU, I think, were kind of in the same boat of you're playing a tough Mountain West team, and I think they split it here. Give me Colorado State to beat Texas. And what should be a fun one. I think Texas,
it'd be a good one.
They'll put up a good fight, but Colorado State, at the end of the day, I think they've already kind of found that rhythm, at least defensively, probably offensively as well in a game where they didn't have to do a whole lot, but still did anyway. And now we get to 2 versus 15. St. Peter's, fan favorite, they're back and playing Tennessee. What do we know about Tennessee? 2 things. Dalton Connect, one of the best scorers, averaging 21 points per game. He is phenomenal to watch. Said several games where he just takes over, and it's just, 1v9 essentially. He doesn't even need the 4 guys on his team to do anything. Just let him take over, and they'll be fine. But St. Peter's, they're top 10 defense when you look at it statistically. Tennessee's top 15. 2 great defensive sets here. What do we know about Rick Barnes, Tyler? It's not great in the postseason.
Okay,
Is Tennessee a 21.5-point favorite going to lose to St. Peter's? No, it's not going to happen.
I'll tell you
as much as I'd like to will it into existence and the Peacock Power returns, I think St. Peter's covers for the joke, and because I sincerely think 2 good defensive teams, St. Peter's will want to slow things down a bit. I think Tennessee wins. But it might be one of those games you look at and you go, what's going on here, folks? Is this going to happen again? Is this going to really happen again? It's not going to, I don't think. But I've been wrong before, Tyler. I've been wrong before.
For the degenerates, a reason to believe in St. Peter's, you touched on it. That defense is actually bona fide. That is a legitimate defensive squad in St. Peter's. They could turn it on and put pressure on people. They've been able to do it throughout the season. That being said, do they have that star standout player? Latrell Reed, solid, 11 points per game, almost 5 boards and 5 assists as well to go with that as a guard. They're gritty, they're tough, but Connect, I think, just a bit too much in the end. I am agreeing that St. Peter's maybe makes this a little hot under the collar for Rick Barnes, if you will, as Tennessee just a bit too much. Just a bit too much. And do we find out more about Tennessee in this round and their actual long-term prospects? Because if Connect has an off day, we've seen him be had a little bit. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later.
We will have to wait and see to get back to what Rocky Top does. But Purdue and TCU going back up to the top. Of course, on your side, Purdue versus Utah State. Purdue, I think, just a little bit too much for TCU. I think they're able to meander their way through one game. As much of intrigue I think they could bring to it, they are one of those gritty teams. Obviously, they were able to take Houston on and win that game in Fort Worth. They don't get Purdue to come to Fort Worth. They're nowhere close to home in this one. I think Purdue gets the job done.
Yeah, I think Purdue, this is where they start sending that message that, hey, we're not last year's squad. We're a bit tougher. For me, it's Utah State, like you said, but I still got Purdue. I mean, Zach Edey has continued to just be that guy. I don't think that either one of those teams are the one that really gets them uncomfortable. And Purdue, for better or less, walks into the Sweet 16 relatively easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where, granted, we talked about this last year with Purdue, and one of those weird things where I feel like this is going to be almost kind of like Virginia's run after they lost to UMBC. I'm not going to go all the way, at least yet. You'll have to wait till the end of the video to see what I think about what Purdue ends up doing. This is going to be almost more of a statement run than it is an actual tournament run, where this is more about, we know what happened last year. We're not letting that happen again ever. This group is not going to let anything get near what happened last year. I think they'll come out full force against Grambling and TCU and easily get to the Sweet 16, like you said. But looking at that other game, which is completely different. I was going to say that other game because it is a completely different game for both of us. I've got Gonzaga versus a very weak at this point Kansas. You have the double upset of McNeese and Samford. The beauty of March, right. Everybody.
Yeah, I've got somebody get a Sweet 16.
I'll let you go with McNeese-Samford first here. Who wins the battle of the upsets in your mind?
Okay, so we look at McNeese. We talk about the analytics, right, and how, of course, being how they are, not the strongest schedule, probably not really favored, by the AI, if you will. Samford, though, the one thing that they do have is quietly a slightly better offense than McNeese. Samford, a much better team than McNeese. Samford, 85th on the KenPom. McNeese is 282, Cade.
Yes.
They were horrible defensively, but their schedule wasn't tough. Samford has gone through just a little bit tougher of a draw. I think in the end, Samford skates into the Sweet 16 where they run into the Boilermakers, and this is really more so about everything breaking right for Purdue. I mean, to get to the Sweet 16 and you get to face Samford,
we'll get to that.
Or even McNeese, right? Either one of those opponents, you'd be like, oh, okay.
Well, I've got a stat for that when we get to your Purdue-Samford hypothetical. But
yeah.
I could break it down.
Samford.
I can break it down easily on the Gonzaga-Kansas side. Kansas is just too beat up by this point.
Absolutely.
If they get through Samford, you've already got, a bruised team, so to speak.
Yeah.
Gonzaga, Graham Ike is going to be able to do whatever he wants. Ryan Nembhard, he's already a good guard. He's going to be able to create some open lanes for people. He's going to be able to just see the floor a little bit easier. Gonzaga is going to dare Kansas to have to do something, and then they're just not going to have an answer. To me, Gonzaga, another clear path to the Sweet 16 for them. If they can, I actually think McNeese is a tougher game for them than
Absolutely
Kansas,
it is, yeah.
which is crazy to say under any circumstance. But I think it sets up Purdue and Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. But then we move down to another set of disagreements. Creighton versus either South Carolina or Oregon. I'll talk about my side first. I'll let you talk about your side the first time. So this one, Oregon, their hot streak will continue for a little bit, but Creighton just too talented. You have someone like Kalkbrenner in there who's able to just control in the paint. Creighton going to go to the Sweet 16. I think it's pretty simple. Creighton's one of those teams that they have that ability this year, as we already talked about. When they're on their A game, they are difficult to contain. And I don't even think they need to bring their A game to beat Oregon. I think that Oregon's kind of one of those that use all their energy up to keep that momentum going just a little bit more. I don't think they can get over the hump 2 games in a row.
As much as I want to believe in the Gamecocks to continue to march on, I think this is the worst draw possible because I think Creighton might quietly be the best team of the Midwest simply because they are part of that Magic 7. Purdue's in there as well. We talk about reaching those needed benchmarks for top offense and defense efficiency to qualify as a potential national champ. I think, again, it goes back to that star power. Creighton, that trio is just unbelievable when they're all cooking, right? When they're all in sync between Shireman, Kalkbrenner, Alexander. Man, that is a squad. I think they kind of realize at this point, getting that win, whether it be against South Carolina or Oregon, that they are that team that can do it. They get that confidence themselves going, and I think the Blue Jays finally become legit down the stretch.
And that moves us down to Tennessee versus Colorado State, that 2-10 that we both agree on. Only game we both agreed on would happen in the second round. Tennessee,
well, if you would have gone for a more conservative bracket,
yeah,
we would have agreed.
Okay. This is what happens when we record stuff at 9:30 at night.
Oh, we're in a prime time.
But Tennessee, I think they're one of those that they have the right mindset in this one. They'll be a bit more even on both sides of the ball than Texas will, so to speak. I think Tennessee holds on. Again, Colorado State, they'll bring the energy, they'll bring the hustle, they'll do whatever they need to do. But at the end of this one, I think Tennessee moves on to the Sweet 16 and kind of one of those redemption moments for Rick Barnes. It's been a while. But I think Tennessee is able to keep on going.
Yeah, I'm in agreement here just because I think this is where Colorado State kind of runs out of steam a bit. You know, they're playing angry right now, playing with a mission. You'll see that against Texas. But then you get in a little bit more of a solid foundation of a team in Tennessee that plays tough defense, has their star, as we mentioned, and that proves to be just a bit too potent for Colorado State to handle down the stretch of the game.
So we have a completely different matchup. Purdue versus Samford on your side.
Yes.
And Purdue versus Gonzaga on my side. So here's your fun stat for you if you believe Tyler's side of how things will work out. Purdue, in the last few years, under Matt Painter, they've lost to a 12 seed when they lost to Little Rock. This is a long time ago. Chris Beard was the coach of Little Rock when they played. They've lost to a 14 seed. They've lost to the 15 seed, of course, that we know about, and a 16. They have not lost to a 13 yet. Samford would be that 13, that unlucky number to have to deal with in the Sweet 16. And you could imagine how people would feel if you hear that stat and then look at what happens. So, Tyler, does the prophecy of Matt Painter and Purdue losing to the bottom 5 seeds possible in the span of what would be like 8 years at this point, 7 or 8 years, does Samford keep going or does Purdue get the win?
This is where Zach Edey really shows how much he has improved from year to year. He's too much for the Bulldogs. Purdue, seemingly on paper, gets a super, super easy path onward. And they kind of run over Samford. Samford has that magic where you upset Kansas, even though we know it's a week in Kansas. That's still a big deal. You win the battle of the mid-majors against McNeese, but the Boilermakers proved to be just too much. Zach Edey, the difference maker, keeps himself clean in the game and really dominates.
I have a bit more of a battle of big men with Edey versus Ike.
Yeah, a good one. That would be fantastic.
That would be a fantastic battle. I think Gonzaga kind of more of that offensive approach. They'll want to take it right to Purdue. But the real key is if you could get pressure on Purdue defensively. If you can bring a little bit, get their guards rattled, I think Gonzaga would have a legitimate chance in this one. But I think Purdue's learned from their mistakes. They figured things out a bit. And they end Gonzaga's run, and Purdue goes to the Elite Eight. Redemption. Exactly. But now we look at Creighton and Tennessee, and I think we might both be in agreement here that Creighton, we talk about their consistency, inconsistency, whatever you want to make of it. I think, you mentioned the 7 of their last 8 that they've won.
Before the conference
tournament. I think they continue to ride that wave. They continue to keep playing well. I think they hold on and beat Tennessee. And this is where that kind of, I don't want to say choking mentality because I feel like that's a bit more of a rude word for it. Sometimes you just run into a better team on a better day. But I think that starts to get in Tennessee's head a little bit that, okay, this is the spot where we always lose. What do we do? Against a team like Creighton that's been in this situation, they've had a little bit more success maybe. But I think Creighton at the end of the day gets the job done.
I mean, we are in agreement here because I think Creighton does, and it's not even that Tennessee senses that, okay, this is where, we got to push past and freak themselves out. I think it just comes down to the fact that Tennessee is basically a Batman with no Robin at this point, right? Connect, as you mentioned, at times goes 1-on-9 and can do it. He's extremely talented. His story has been amazing. He's a guy that's easy to root for with his path, going from junior college, Northern Colorado, to then even up in the game now to Tennessee. That's awesome. That's what college is about right there, especially nowadays because you hear so much about, well, if you're not D1, you're nothing. And folks, again, I promise you, if you go search the expansion of college sports, your D2s, your JUCOs, your NAIAs, all that, there are some legit players that reside in these lower levels that just, for whatever reason, get a little overlooked coming out of high school. Maybe they're not as developed physically as they need to be or whatever, but they're legit players, and he's a great story of that. But Creighton's got Batman. They've got Superman, and they've got the Flash, and they've got the Justice League.
Yeah, so they're
compared
building
to
the
just
Justice
Batman,
League over there.
You know,
and that's what I'm kind of talking about.
It's just
though.
too much star power at the end.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by the pressure getting to them. When you have that 1-on-9 and you play that way for so long where you're almost just one guy trying to do everything, as you mentioned, you've got so much talent versus one. I think you start to get into some other guys think, well, I have to do something.
Yeah.
I have to make a play here. And then you start overthinking, and then you start rushing it.
Playing out of your role.
Yeah, and you start playing, exactly, playing out of your role. I think Tennessee starts to not panic a bit as more as they make a few bad decisions at the absolutely worst times possible.
Right, close game down the stretch. Yeah. They just don't capitalize.
I don't want to lead anyone to believe I think Tennessee's going to come in and absolutely get, spooked in the first 5 minutes and fold.
Yeah.
I don't think that's how this game goes. I think it's a battle to the very end, but Creighton gets the job done to set up Purdue and Creighton as the Elite Eight game. And Purdue...
So in the end, despite all the chaos... In the end,
despite all our differences, we agree that once again, it is a 1 versus a 3. It's a top 3 seeded battle again. But this might be where we differ, though, because I hate to do this. It makes me feel bad that I did this because it's something that I don't ever do in a bracket. But I'm going to pick all 4 1 seeds.
Oh, my gosh.
Purdue gets the job done.
Do not trust this bracket. Okay. That never happens.
That does never happen, but I talked about it a little bit earlier. This feels like the year it would, though. UConn, Houston, clearly defined almost most of the years that 1 and 2. Purdue's been in that mix as well. Everyone kind of knows, how to beat them, but it's almost a near impossible task. It can be done. We've seen it happen. It just happened to Purdue a few days ago, happened to Houston a few days ago. But it's so difficult to get it done. There's a reason why these are all 1 seeds. And I think Purdue is just a little bit tougher than Creighton is. I think Edey can win that battle with Kalkbrenner. Not by a whole lot, but it'll be close. But at the end of the day, I think Creighton, that inconsistency shows up for just a little bit. And kind of like you mentioned in your bracket, Purdue just kind of gets to be at the right place at the right time. And they don't watch Creighton fall apart, but they're able to react just enough to get the job done and go to the Final Four.
This is where we differ, because I believe this is where Creighton exposes, quote-unquote, Edey a bit. They go at him early and often, and they really, you talk about getting pressure a minute ago on that Purdue defense, their guards specifically. Purdue does not have an answer for Trey Alexander. They would not be able to contain him. That's how I kind of feel about that matchup. So if Creighton's there, I expect Alexander to have a big game, and then you factor in Shireman and Kalkbrenner, and that's going to be too much for Purdue to handle at one time. With those 3 guys cooking, Edey can only guard so many people, right? He's tall, but he can't be everywhere all at once. And if he has to even step out a little bit to try to help with Trey Alexander, it's over. Creighton will take that game. I wouldn't say, in a blowout fashion, but they'll make it look a little more comfortable than it probably was, I guess what I'm trying to say. So for me, I wind up with a 1, 2, 3, and 4 seed in the Final Four. How about that?
There you go. Perfect sequence of numbers. And, of course, we look up at mine, and it's the most chalk thing imaginable with 4.
Ooh chalk.
But I guess now looking at the Final Four portion of this thing is we'll just add it onto this video. The way I see it playing out, UConn and North Carolina, I think UConn, going back to that video we talked about, I think they just, when they hit that next level, they are unbelievable. They are difficult to deal with. I think you give me Klingon versus Baycott. I think Klingon wins that battle, 9 times out of 10. I think R.J. Davis can be shut down. I think UConn could find a way to at least stop him momentarily enough. I like UConn to beat North Carolina. And then Houston, with their physicality, I think this is where you rough Edey up. You absolutely bring the havoc and the pressure. Give me a UConn-Houston national championship. I can't believe I'm saying this because this doesn't happen often. I think UConn goes back-to-back.
Look at this guy just eating the hard chalk.
Just absolutely as chalk as possible. But Tyler, obviously, you have a completely different Final Four than I do. You don't even have UConn here.
No.
You have Auburn
We've
here.
got one matching.
We've got one matching in Houston.
Yeah, so on the side where you would have UConn, North Carolina, I've got Auburn, Arizona. This sets up very interesting matchup. I kept going back to this today as I was kind of finalizing my bracket after, getting down thoughts on teams. I just think that depth for Auburn is so unique in this tournament compared to everybody else right now. Where Bruce Pearl is just trusting so many different guys. They all kind of step up. You remember that Kentucky team that was star-studded freshman, Anthony Davis was on it. He wasn't even, starting half the time. He was playing in more of a six-man role. He played starters minutes, but he wouldn't start. That team isn't as deep as what Auburn's got. And that team rolled in the tournament because you couldn't single in on one guy. I feel that it's just breaking right for Auburn in that sense. They outlast Arizona in a really good game, punched their ticket to the national championship. And on the other side, you got Houston Creighton. Talked about the star power with Creighton. This is where the athleticism, the physicality of Houston overcomes that, ends the Jays' run. Houston does get to the championship game. So you get Auburn, you get Houston, Pearl, Sampson. Very, very interesting matchup. Two extremely experienced coaches and two really talented teams. In the end, we talked about some of those offensive woes for Houston earlier in the season. They're not as deep. They've got elite guard play. Auburn may not have quite as elite guard play, but they've got the bodies to throw at that elite guard play. And in the end, the forwards of Auburn get it done. And I hate to say it, but I got Auburn taking the whole dang thing.
There you go. So I
feel disgusted. I want to take a bath, a shower, wash myself. Can't believe
we're almost kind of in agreement then, because I kind of believe the same way you do, that you look at this UConn-Auburn game, and that is almost the decider, that is the decider right there. I feel like whoever wins that
has to go.
Not that they're going to blow past Iowa State or whoever they get in the Final Four, but I feel like if you win that, that's the fight to at least get to the national championship game, and then you enter that bout with Houston. As you mentioned, the offensive woes. I don't disagree with your pick of Auburn. That's one of those that, to me, the way they're playing, at least right now, they're definitely not a 4. We can easily say that.
Yeah, they're underrated.
They're top 3.
They remind me of UConn last year, where I think UConn just got a little underseeded just because of down the stretch. You had some teams catch some fire, and the committee, played a little recency bias and kind of ignored the analytics, right? Auburn, I think, is in that same boat. Reminder, they are the only team in the country this season. And usually you go back and look at previous seasons, there's multiple teams in this category. But Auburn is the one team this year that, according to Kim Palm, is top 10 both offensively and defensively in efficiency. And with the depth that they have, to me, that's eye-popping, just because you would figure with a broader stroke of players in the mix, right, more hands in the pot, it'd be tough to keep that efficiency. But the fact that they do it, that screams to me that all those guys are locked in. They understand what they're doing. They know their role. And they were hot down stretch, right? I think they're playing with that chip, if you will, similar to what UConn had last year.
It is going to be a fun tournament, to say the least. It's always interesting to me because, yes, I did the unthinkable, the most chalk bracket humanly imaginable. You never want to see that happen. You always root for the chaos. You always root to see the craziest storyline. You always root for the little guy to see how far this goes. And that's the fun of March. It really is. Some school you've never heard of in your life that you find out has maybe a funny name or a good player or something like that. Or, like we talked about Long Beach State, a coach that got fired, but he's still there. There's always some great storyline that shows up in March. And it's always it's a great time. It is truly some of the best just few weeks of the year sports-wise.
Also, how disgusting would it be to see Bruce Pearl win the championship when the NIL stuff is so on the table now?
Oh man, I mean it'd be funny
it'd
though.
It'd be so fitting, wouldn't it?
It would be hysterical almost. I mean, the only thing that'd be funnier is if you've got Bruce Pearl versus Will Wade. That would be the dream. Just we're gonna win this thing. We don't care how we're gonna win it, but we're gonna win it anyway. And I mean, sometimes you get moments like that, but it will be great to see. As always, folks, thank you for watching. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, make fun of me for my chalk bracket, or say Tyler is too much chaos. Too much chaos is never a bad thing in March, though, I guess.
It can be a bad thing, yeah.
It can be, but...
It ruin your bracket.
It can. Well, no one's ever gotten a perfect bracket, though. So, hey, we're still trying to find that, maybe one day in the year, 6,000 when they're still... if we're still playing it by then, we'll have to wait and see. But, folks, as always, once again, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, all those great things. It's truly, it only takes 5 seconds. You may not think it's a big deal, but it does mean a lot to us, and we do appreciate it. But, folks, enjoy the madness, and until next time, have a good one, everybody.